The kitchen that learned to grieve. Grief does not announce itself loudly. It settles into routines, hides in repetition, and waits for quiet moments to surface. In one kitchen, loss arrived not as collapse, but as a question no recipe could answer. The restaurant had always been full. Not famous, not hidden, just steady. A place people returned to because it felt grounded, familiar, dependable. The kind of kitchen built on consistency rather than spectacle. But when the loss came, it did not change the dining room. It changed the hands working behind it. The chef had lost someone who never appeared on the menu, never spoke to guests, never sought credit. Someone whose presence had shaped every dish without being named. In the weeks that followed, the kitchen continued to function. Orders were filled, plates were sent, smiles were practiced. Yet something essential had shifted beneath the surface. To understand how a kitchen learns to grieve, we must understand how it learns to hide. Cooking teaches control, timing, precision. There is no room for emotion during service. Fire does not wait. Guests do not pause. Loss is postponed until after the last plate leaves the pass. But when grief is deferred long enough, it finds another way in. At first, the chef noticed it in small hesitations. A pause before seasoning. A hand resting longer on the counter. Dishes that once flowed effortlessly now required thought. The food was still good, but it felt quieter, heavier, as if carrying something unspoken. The staff felt it too. Conversations slowed. Jokes faded. The kitchen became a place of careful silence. Each person unsure how to acknowledge what had happened without breaking the fragile balance holding service together. No one spoke about grief. Instead, it began speaking to the food, and slowly, without realizing it, the kitchen started changing, not to escape the loss, but to make room for it. At first, the changes were unintentional. Portions grew smaller. Garnishes disappeared. Plates arrived simpler than before. Stripped of flourishes no one felt like defending. The chef did not announce a new direction. He barely noticed it himself. Grief has a way of narrowing focus, removing anything that feels unnecessary. Regulars noticed. Some asked if the menu had changed. Others said nothing, but lingered longer at the table. The food tasted more direct now, less eager to please. It didn't distract. It stayed. The chef watched reactions carefully, unsure whether he was losing control or finally telling the truth. Inside the kitchen, silence deepened. Music went unplayed. Prep was done with unusual care. Cooks moved gently around one another, as if noise itself might disturb something fragile. When mistakes happened, no one raised their voice. There was no energy for anger, only attention. One night, a cook asked quietly whether they should bring back a popular dish that had disappeared from a menu. It had always sold well. Guests still requested it. The chef considered the question longer than expected, then shook his head. It wasn't refusal. It was honesty. That dish belonged to a time before the loss. Recreating it felt false, like pretending nothing had changed. And for the first time, the chef realized that grief was not something to work through and move past. It was something that would remain and demand accommodation. As days turned into weeks, the kitchen adapted. Service slowed slightly. The menu shortened further. Techniques once prized for precision gave way to methods that allowed variation. The chef stopped correcting small imperfections. He let dishes land where they landed. Not careless, but accepting. Some guests complained. They missed the old rhythm, the predictability. A few stopped coming, but others returned more often, sensing that something rare was happening. The restaurant no longer offered escape. It offered presence. The staff began talking again, not about the loss, but around it. Stories surfaced naturally. Laughter returned in softer forms. Grief was no longer an absence haunting the kitchen. It had become a condition the kitchen learned to work with. Still, the chef wrestled with doubt. Was he honoring the loss, or letting it reshape something that didn't belong to him alone? The conflict was forming quietly, between responsibility to the past and responsibility to the present, between preserving what the restaurant had been and allowing it to become something new. And soon, that conflict would ask the chef to make a choice he could no longer avoid. The choice arrived during a service that felt heavier than the rest, a full dining room. Familiar faces. Expectations shaped by memory. The chef moved through the kitchen with practiced calm. But inside, the question pressed harder with every plate sent out. Midway through the evening, a longtime regular asked to see him. Not to complain, not to praise, just to say something felt different, quieter, more serious. They asked if everything was all right. The chef hesitated, then answered honestly. The words stayed with him long after the guests returned to their table. Real, not perfect, not consistent, but present. The kitchen was no longer performing stability. It was living through change. And the chef realized that grief had not taken something away from the restaurant. It had stripped away what was no longer true. That night, after service ended, the staff stayed behind. No meeting had been planned, no announcement prepared, but everyone felt the same need to sit together in the empty dining room. The chef spoke without rehearsing, explaining that the restaurant could not return to what it had been, not because of failure, because of honesty. He told them that grief had altered his hands, his instincts, his patience, that pretending otherwise would turn cooking into imitation. He offered them a choice: to stay and help shape something unfamiliar, or to leave with gratitude and no resentment. No one answered immediately. Then one cook nodded, then another. No speeches followed. The kitchen began to change deliberately. Old recipes were set aside, not discarded, but acknowledged as belonging to another chapter. New dishes emerged slowly, built from fewer elements, allowing space for pause. Service was redesigned to breathe. Silence was no longer accidental. It was respected. The restaurant lost momentum in the industry. Fewer mentions, fewer recommendations. It stopped being easy to describe. But for those who stayed, something deeper formed. Cooking felt like conversation again. Guests felt invited into something unfinished, human, and honest. Grief had become a teacher, not by offering lessons, but by demanding patience, by insisting that not everything needs resolution, by reminding the kitchen that presence can be more meaningful than perfection. The emotional peak was not dramatic. It was quiet acceptance. And from that acceptance, the kitchen found a new way forward, one that did not erase the loss, but carried it carefully, plate by plate. The restaurant never announced its transformation. There was no reopening, no rebrand, no explanation offered to those who noticed a shift. It simply continued, changed but intact. Grief was no longer something hidden behind routine. It had been woven into how the kitchen worked, breathed, and listened. Guests adapted. Some drifted away, searching for the comfort of predictability elsewhere. Others leaned in, drawn by the honesty of a place that did not pretend to be untouched. Meals unfolded more slowly now. Conversations lingered. Silence was no longer awkward. It was shared. The chef discovered something unexpected in that quiet. By allowing grief to exist, the kitchen had become more generous. Mistakes were treated with care instead of correction. Staff supported one another without needing to name why. Cooking regained its intimacy, not as performance, but as service in its truest sense. Years later, new cooks joined the kitchen without knowing its history. They learned its rhythms without being told where they came from. The grief was no longer visible as loss. It lived on as restraint, patience, and humility. The restaurant had not healed by moving on. It had healed by making space. The chef never returned to the dishes that once defined the place, not out of avoidance, but because he understood that honoring the past did not require recreating it. It required continuing honestly from where he stood. And that honesty reshaped everything. In a world that urges us to recover quickly, to smooth grief into something productive, this kitchen offered another model, one where loss is not solved. It is carried, integrated, allowed to deepen rather than diminish. Because sometimes the most meaningful transformations are not born from ambition or innovation. They are born from listening to what hurts and choosing not to rush past it. Subscribe to join the journey. The